Hi everyone, my name is Lonnie Olazaba. I'm a senior manager at LinkedIn. All of us have a LinkedIn profile? My role, or TA's role in the overall, is basically just supporting our hiring managers, educating, encouraging, and supporting our hiring managers in identifying and attracting top talent.
I'm Rafawn Davis, Global Head of Culture and Inclusion at Twilio. Twilio is a communication disruptor, so it's the way that you talk to your Uber and Lyft driver. It's the easiest way to explain it. My role in talent is to consult. So I get the pleasure of consulting with talent acquisition, creating trainings for hiring managers, talking about unconscious bias, all that kind of great stuff.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me. Can you hear me?
No.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Marco Rogers. I'm the Director of Product Engineering at Lever. Lever creates recruiting and HR software to help people actually hire better. And I just kind of started working there about a month ago, so you can tell this is like a passion of mine, and I'm trying to put myself in the place to have a real impact here. I'm kind of directly involved in all the hiring decisions, from going through interviews, setting up the actual process, and setting priorities, like who do we hire, what positions, and what are the criteria for those.
So let's start really broad. Why don't you tell us, any of you can start first, why don't you tell us, and what are you working on in terms of expanding and diversifying your candidate pool? What populations are you working in? What does the initiative look like? What was the catalyst for it? All that good stuff.
So something I'm really excited about is, I've actually been at Twilio for 6 months, but I've been in D&I and tech for over a decade. We just launched Hatch, which is our apprenticeship program, and it is a 6-month program focused on people with non-traditional technical backgrounds, aka boot camps, that are underrepresented in tech. So we look for people that have a 12-week boot camp education, not the 2-year, not a 4-year. You cannot have a 4-year computer science degree. And the apprenticeships, the apprentices came from, one of them used to be a truck driver and a sushi chef. There's another one that was in the wine industry. Another one who was in computer science in school and dropped out because she didn't like the environment. She didn't like the environment, so she stopped, but she was developing kind of websites on the side for mom and pop businesses in her neighborhood, like the landscaper or the local, brick and mortar shop in her neighborhood. So we look for people who just kind of got excited about computer science later on, right? So people who didn't go to school for it. And they come into the company for 3 months and work together as a cohort on one of our nonprofit projects. So we have Twilio.org is our foundation, and they work on a project for a company there. And then for the next 3 months, they sit within product engineering teams that have headcount. And that last part is really important. So we didn't want to just create a program where we're creating exposure, but we want to create a program that's creating real access to opportunity, that's removing the barriers to entry and allowing them to land a real job, right? And so, when you think of apprenticeships, you're thinking of, blacksmiths and electricians and, things where you get hands-on experience and hands-on training, and that's what this is. And so at the end of that, they will be junior developers within our company.
We actually have a very similar program, the Reach program, which is identifying talent that we wouldn't otherwise see through our general recruiting activity. So our approach was removing the qualifications that we have on our standard job description and attracting talent that wouldn't have the basic qualifications that would be listed. Our criteria was answering 3 questions. And the 3 questions were, who are you? Tell me something about who you are as a person. Tell us how you got into technology. Why are you passionate about technology? And why are you interested in LinkedIn? Because we want to attract talent that wants to be at LinkedIn for part of our mission and following our goals. From there, what we did was we had a committee, and the hiring committee basically didn't look at resumes at all. So what we looked at was the 3 questions. And through the 3 questions, we identified grit, perseverance, passion, those non-tangibles, and we identified 50 individuals that we brought in through our interviewing process. Our interviewing process was a bit unique in that we did need to identify technical aptitude, so there was a coding opportunity. There was also leadership and craftsmanship. For LinkedIn, acting like an owner is one of our core values. So how do you lead by example is a trait that we wanted to look for that you wouldn't see on a resume. Craftsmanship, the care, the quality of the work that you do. We demand excellence of ourselves at LinkedIn, so that was an important trait. So through that, we identified 30 individuals who came into our apprenticeship program. They worked for 6 months, similar on projects, and I'm very happy to say 23 of those will receive full-time offers. Our cohort is ending this month, and we'll start a second cohort. It's awesome.
Definitely that third one. I love both of those answers. I'm very much a big fan of the apprenticeship thing. I definitely plan to build it at Lever. I built it at my last company. And it's one of those things where I think in this area, a lot of people who are hiring for engineering teams and other tech roles, there's this mantra of like, we're gonna hire the best. And what that ends up being in practice is that nobody feels like they have room for people who are just starting out to invest in them. And creating that apprenticeship program is probably kind of the best avenue today to kind of get around that assumption and say like, we are going to invest in these people. We just have to put some structure around it. You're going to be able to see the value. So I'm all about that. I would actually want to answer the question by approaching it from a little bit different perspective. As a hiring manager, what I've been able to have the most impact on is how our actual kind of recruiting and hiring process happens, like across the board. And so while pushing for those, kind of people just starting out, I wanted to make sure that we started to look at what's keeping people at all levels out of our funnel, right? Because there are Black and brown people who are in this industry and who do need jobs. And somehow they're also not making it through my funnel, right? Like I've been a hiring manager for about 6 years now, and the thing that I keep contending with is like, I don't even get the opportunity to interview these people. Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of like, are we lowering the bar situation? I'm like, we don't even know. They're not even here. I have not talked to them. And so I'm more interested in kind of really looking at how we do sourcing. Like I know that there's a community out there, but we are not tapping it. And that's actually is not something that we should take for granted, because what we have gotten really good at in the Bay Area is creating a network. Like it's not hard for me to hire engineers because they all know each other. If I have a brand and I have a network, like they come to me. Like this is a thing that we know about, but those people that we want to hire from underrepresented groups are not in that funnel for some reason. And so that's what we're kind of working on.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to, actually, can you hear me without the mic? So you can just keep it. I think that speaks a lot to this fallacy where especially recruiters, just all across the board, the thought is, I can't find these people, therefore they're not there. And that's where the problem is. So I'd love for you all to get a little bit more, we're saying a little top of the funnel now, about sourcing. So Marco, what are some ideas you've had, even if you haven't executed? Lonnie LaFawn, you're saying you brought in this apprenticeship program that very much targets a different audience. What does that mean in terms of adjustments you had to make to source those groups?
So definitely it was a way of, we started from the job description. Again, so our job descriptions typically for general recruiting practices have basic qualification, preferred qualifications. So when you have a job description, and if you're a job seeker and you look at the job description and you don't fit those qualifications, you're going to opt out and you're not going to apply. So that was the first thing that we had to look at, was how could we adjust our job description? For instance, taking out educational credentials. So computer science degree, that's the cream of the crop for an engineer. However, there is talent that self-taught computers, individuals who have built computers from scratch or have went to boot camps and established. So that was the first step. The other thing that we're doing is establishing ourselves in the community, right? And letting it be known that we are a company where inclusion and belonging is a part of our culture and it's important to us. So establishing relationships with organizations like Code 2040, JobWell, DevColor, to bring awareness that we are a company that wants this talent, and that actually just being a part of the community and establishing relationships. At LinkedIn, we believe relationships matter. So if we can establish relationships with people, and that talent is going to naturally and organically be attracted to us and also want to stay with us as an organization.
Yeah, for sure. Love it. So I think that my answer is going to be similar, but more targeted, right? So for me, the way I learned to be a hiring manager, like I was kind of made into a manager, and then like the very next conversation is like, go hire some people, right? And so you have to figure out what that is. Like nobody actually tells you how to do that. And there's a set of ways that it happens. What you do is you start going to meetups, right? Like, the Bay Area is really good for like local tech meetups where people congregate around their favorite open source project or languages and stuff, and that's where you go to like meet other tech people. And so I would go to those things, and it was actually great for recruiting, except that there were no like Black and brown people, or no, like very few women. Like those places are not diverse in themselves, and so you don't have that opportunity to bring in a diverse set of people. And so for me, it was about starting to really cultivate the kinds of events that are going to attract the kind of diverse set that we want to have. So I've seen those. I've seen like more people start meetups around inviting the kind of demographics that they want to see, and just that has been huge, right? So and if we're talking about kind of some of the causation around it, what's changing is really about helping us have a strong network, just like the people who usually get hired, right? So my experience as an engineer, I've been doing this for like 12 plus years, but I never had a network. Like I would always be the person kind of submitting an application and waiting, and like maybe I knew somebody, hopefully, who could get me in the door. But there was a point when when I moved to the Bay Area and I got myself established and I got into that network where I never had to do that again. Like literally every time I say like maybe be looking for another job, like all of a sudden all of my friends and all the other people I know who like who know that I'm talented, they're like, let me talk to you about the job I have, right? So that's actually what everybody should be experiencing. Like tech is one of the few industries that is growing, that has this opportunity, and there should be no reason why if you are talented, that job shouldn't be coming to you. And so I think that's where the disconnect is that we are used to hiring through a network, but we haven't helped people. We haven't helped everybody build that network. Like they found it very difficult to get into. So at the top of the funnel, that's where I see like the most value is creating that network, like events like this.
So I'll approach it a little bit differently. When we launched the Hatch program, we launched it accidentally. So we initially were just going to source directly from the boot camps. So we were going to work with a Dev Boot Camp, which unfortunately is closing their doors, HackBright Academy, and Hack Reactor. And so we were initially just going to go to those boot camps, get folks from there, because it's our first cohort, right? We're trying to get out, making sure that we're doing it right. So we sent out a link for people to apply through those boot camps, and it got leaked. So it was posted to like an external engineering Slack channel. It went viral. This was well before we did our official launch. We didn't have a logo, we didn't have any of that ready, right? And I also officially launched it because of this at Signal, which is our developer conference, which was in May, at the end of May. And so by the time we actually launched it officially, we had about 2,500 applications within a week and a half. We did not have to work to find folks. We did not have to work to find folks. They were already there and they were ready to apply. We just had to lower the barrier for them to apply. Again, taking stuff off of the job description, not making it so difficult for people to walk in the door. They came without us doing hard recruiting. And so what we had to do is we whittled it down to about 250. We brought people in, or not 250, but 250 was the line where we said, okay, these are viable. After that, we brought in probably about 20 for batch interviews. And we only had 5 slots because we were trying out a 6-month cohort. But we did commit publicly to have 100 apprentices go through our program over the next 5 years. We're less than 1,000 people at my company. So that is, 10% of our workforce can be from the apprenticeship program. And so it was a lesson to us that, if you build it, they will come, right? It wasn't difficult to find people that had non-traditional backgrounds. It wasn't difficult to find people that were underrepresented in tech. We just had to do it in a particular way that spoke to folks that aren't traditional. And so People will often ask, well, how did you make that happen? And was it difficult within the company? It wasn't. Even at the Signal conference when I announced it, I asked the CEO, so what can all of these developers do to help create more doers? That's what we call people in the tech space, people that can do, right? And he said, we're in a safe space, right? It's being recorded.
What happens here stays.
He said, don't be an asshole, right? If people don't have the same background as you, if they didn't come from MIT or Columbia or have a 4-year degree, don't be an asshole. If they're working on a project or they want to get into this space, we need more people to do things, and we have, we have more jobs than we have people to do them. So let's create space for everybody. And so I find when you have more of an environment like that, and you make sure there is a headcount within your company, again, to create real opportunities, it's not hard. The sourcing isn't hard. You just have to change the way you're doing it.
I just wanted to mention that's a great segue into opportunities to get into the communities. LinkedIn has also established a program that is actually a community program where we reach the community, and it's called the Open Mic Night. This is a phenomenal way where we pre-identify talent that we would like to introduce to LinkedIn and have them get to know LinkedIn a little bit more, but we bring them in more of a social setting. So come in, get to know LinkedIn. The evening consists of learning about LinkedIn as an organization, and also sharing in the talent. All of us have talent that's beyond our day jobs, so having fun through music, music and art and spoken word. So guests come to LinkedIn, they enjoy the talent show that we have. We actually ask the guests to perform with us. Our engineers give some fire talks, and in the end, relationships are built. Again, the community of inclusion and belonging is established, and we have our stake there. And if an individual is not ready right now, you have to nurture them in an aspect. So when the time does come that they want to make a career move, you are the employer of choice because they've gotten to know who you are as an organization, and they've gotten behind the initiatives that you're focusing on as a company that they wouldn't have known about had they not been introduced in this kind of non-traditional way.
So getting a little bit more actionable and, looking to the candidates in the room too. What would you all suggest? Say they come to an event, it really resonates with them. They think LinkedIn, Twilio, Lever have a great culture. What should they do after that event? Should they wait for you? I feel like that's typically what people try to do, right? Or end up doing, but how would they continue that relationship? What's their role in it?
I think that's a great question. So using the open mic again as an example, post-event, I hosted the event. We have an individual, the birth of the event came from the great mind of one of our employees. We also had a program manager who did the reach out. So there were a lot of touch points within LinkedIn, and the individual, basically, whoever you resonated with, if you connected with somebody, that's the connection. If you've established a relationship with somebody. So I've gotten messages post open mic. My colleagues have. Our VP of engineering, who did this, part of the talk, he was reached out to. So I would say whoever you felt a connection with or you've had some interaction with, then you should go to that person and get an intro into taking it further. Also, the company does follow-ups. I'm sure any organization that has an event, there are follow-ups, and you can just wait for that follow-up and then engage from there. But I would also say be proactive in identifying what opportunities are available at LinkedIn or at the other companies. Go to the websites and learn about the organizations and see where your talent can best be applicable so that you're ready for those conversations, either if you provoke them or you wait to be contacted.
Yeah, I can jump in. So you do have to be proactive. So in this room, I think, if we're being really honest, the reality is, I'm hiring, I want to be able to hire people, but there's a process, right? I actually have constraints all over, how I can do it. And so even if you kind of run into me at a conference, which is actually really great, you should get my contact info, you should really follow up with me. What I'm going to tell you is that, there's a process, and, you should stay in touch with me. And then there's, a moment, there's, a window when I would be are you ready? You know what I mean? You should apply or whatever. And you have to be on it, right? And I think I worry about that process. I want to improve it. I want it to be more open, but we also kind of have to work within it, right? And so I think the challenge that happens is when I meet somebody, like I'll give them all my info, I'll give them my email, Twitter, like hit me up, here's all the ways that you can reach me, and then it never happens, right? Like they never follow up with me. There's a moment when like I could do something and like you want to be top of mind for me and like you miss that opportunity, right? And so, that's just some practical advice. Like you can meet a lot of people at these places, but like you have to follow up, right? Like you have to actually be on their radar when it's time because the positions are limited. You know what I mean? The positions are limited, and so there's lots of people who are qualified and who are smart, and whoever's top of mind, and like they're just gonna get into that process before everybody else. That's just the way that works.
Yeah.
For candidates, right? I would say don't do surface level networking. I haven't had business cards in 6 years. LinkedIn, right? My name is not hard to remember, and I'm the only LaFauna Twilio. I know that shocks you, but when you do surface level networking, you're not remembered. Your story isn't remembered, right? And if you want to be top of mind for someone who can actually create an opportunity for you, you have to do the work. Share your story.
What's surface level networking?
Surface level is here's my card. That's surface level. Surface level is, I'd really love to work there. Okay, thanks, bye. Right? Or just shaking a hand and walking away. Who are you? Why do you want to work at Twilio? What can I do for you? I guarantee you, if I'm contacted by a candidate, I have passed you on to our recruiting team who is hungry. They are hungry because that's less work they have to do. Right? So if I'm like, hey, there's this person that I met and here's their story, they're like, yep, got it. Or even if there's not an opportunity for them right there, they're like, I don't know if that's a good fit right now, but I'm going to reach out to them anyway. I guarantee you, at least at companies of our size, that's what happens. Right? Sometimes you go into the black hole if you just apply online. I'm not going into the applicant tracking system looking for people. I'm not. That's not my role. Right? So if you reach out to me and I'm like, okay, let me pass you on to one of the recruiters. Okay, where do you want to be? How can we identify something for you? Like that's the way that you network. Not the business card exchange, not the, okay, thank you, now that you have my card, you're going to contact me. It works on both ends, where you have to create the relationship and then the company has to do the good job of, even if there's not an opportunity, of trying to keep you warm, of keeping you apprised. But if you're top of mind, you'll get contacted at some point, but you have to do the work.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree with that.
I think that's a really good segue into the interview process itself. So sourcing, recruiting, interacting with potential candidates is a critical first step. However, you can put as many people at the top of the funnel, and if the funnel is broken, you're just going to get the same results. So could you tell us a little bit, looking at this interview process, Marco, that you're not happy with, that you all know needs improvement, what are certain things you're looking at, you're considering, adjusting in terms of developing a process that can really identify great, diverse talent, not just one specific type of talent?
Well, I can tell you data helps, right? So just assuming that your interview process is good isn't good enough. Mm-hmm. So we use data. So we've used, have you all heard of Adopica? No? All right, we'll look it up. It's actually, it's a startup. I know the co-founder, Laura Gomez, who's amazing, but we basically fed the data to Adopica, which looked at our historical data for our funnel through all of the stages. That's like, here's how, the resume, here's where they went to phone screen, the on-site, the waterfall reports, standard reports. But they looked at all of our data and at each stage looked at whether or not people were making it through at the right rate. And that helps you see whether or not there is a breakdown in your process, whether there's bias in your process, if there's a particular community that's getting through the funnel but maybe not making it past a certain stage. And they can look at it historically. You can almost pinpoint certain things. I'll give you an example. There was a spike in the Asian community applying for not engineering roles, business roles. And we're like, what happened in May? What was this spike? And it was because we hired our COO, George Hu. And that was announced. They saw someone of Asian descent in leadership, a C-level executive. And so that was a spike. When I was hired, there was a spike, right? And so you can start to pinpoint certain actions in your company and see if there's certain ways that people are moving through the funnel. So data helps a lot. We're also looking at our interview process and training, not just hiring managers, but anyone who's going to interview is going to be required. If you are interviewing anybody, you have to go through this training. And there we talk about what kind of questions to ask. You can't just ask things like, if I have a jar that's this big, how many marbles do you think are in it? Right? It's not an indicator of success in a particular role. Behavior-based interviewing is the best way to tell someone's past experience and how they perform in a role. It's not just about their cognitive ability and can they think in a different way or a cool way or just like you. So we're training everybody on that. We're training everyone on not only what unconscious bias is, but how to mitigate bias, how it shows up in the workplace, the decision-making that hiring managers have and the effect that that has on the funnel as well. And so we're going through that process so that we are consistently looking at our interview process, we're consistently looking at our hiring process, and making sure that even if we eliminate all bias in our systems, there are people that are a part of it. So your interview process is always going to be biased. Always. Even if you eliminate it from your systems, you eliminate it from your official process, if people are interviewing, you're always going to have bias. So you have to constantly work to educate the organization so that you can at least learn how to mitigate it.
Also, that's great points. And the other thing that I think is important is when you develop organizations or when you develop programs like REACH and like the apprenticeship program, have the learnings from those programs. And that's how you tell the story, you grow. So you start with this program and you've identified this talent that you wouldn't have found in your general practices. And through those learnings, then you can go look at your general practice of how you evaluate your modules. And are they identified? How can you adjust them to identify the talent that you identified through the program that you wouldn't have otherwise recognized? So that's what we're doing right now. So through identifying all of these individuals through the REACH program, we're now looking at how do we evaluate in our general stream and how can we adjust so that we're not only identifying that raw talent that we in the general pool, but we're also expanding our talent pool to this untapped talent that we identified through REACH.
Yeah, so I want to kind of take a more concrete approach, right? So I've built hiring processes like three times at 3 different companies now. My job, like I take my job as a hiring manager really seriously. Like I'm building the team that I'm going to run. And a lot of times, I know that people with recruiting backgrounds here, a lot of times it's like people kind of look to recruiting to like get some people in, and then you just hire those people because you have a lot of pressure to hire people, and then you like try to make that team work. And I'm like, nah, I'm gonna hire the people I want on my team, and my team is gonna be the team that I want it to be. And so I've always just really engaged with that whole process of hiring people. And so the first thing I realized is that it's a mess. It's like completely ad hoc most of the time. Like people don't even like interviewing. And so there's no way we can really talk about like whether we are hiring the best people. Like it was made up. Like that's the first thing I learned. Like really, because like there's nothing here that says you are even like being deliberate about how you do this. And so how are you hiring the best people? And so we started to kind of look at what do we actually want to get out of each stage of the hiring process, right? Like and there's a difference between like there's always more people coming into your funnel than you have time to talk to, right? But we wanted to talk about 2 things specifically. One is that there's a difference between screening out and screening in, right? So you have an overwhelming number of candidates. What you're doing is every stage is about getting people out of it because you can't talk to as many people. Screening in is about how do we actually think about who we want and like make processes that actually encourage those people into the funnel, right? Like we want to increase the chance that the people in our funnel are the people we actually wanted to talk to, right? So I actually spend a way less time on inbounds, right? And I'm just being really real with y'all right now. If you're like just getting your application and sending it out there, that's cool. You should totally do that. There's a chance there, but it's not a high one, right? Like instead, what I do is I spend way more time on finding people whose profiles actually match what we said we wanted. That assumes the second part, which is like we got to talk about what it is that we actually want, right? And so what we also do, I work really hard with engineers to talk about like a rubric, like how do we describe what it is to be successful here, and like can we actually describe that, and then use that to say are we actually evaluating that in our interviews, And so we work really hard on each session. Like, what are you going into this session to find out? What are the questions that you can ask to find that out? Like, here are the kind of different answers you might get. How are we going to score those? Like, and engineers, like, they'll get into this. Like, at first it feels like busy work, but when you put structure around it, like, they will get into this and they'll be like, I want my scorecard. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I want to say that, like, I took a very scientific approach to doing this and very strong. I really want us to hire this candidate. Like, they will get into it. But that took a while. Like, I had to actually talk more to, my managers and the execs about spending so much time on this. But the value is there, right? Like, the value is there. We actually optimize for more interviews, not less. Like, that's probably also a different thing. I think if I have been successful at hiring, a lot of it is volume. Like, we got really good and had a lot of interviews, so that waiting for the right person, like, felt less hard. You know what I mean? Like, if you only really having like one interview a week, like, of course, like, as the weeks go by, that pressure just to pick one of these people is going to go up. But, like, we were having like 8 to 10 every week, and that felt really hard to people. And yet we were really able to be more consistent about, like, these people just don't meet, the criteria, but these people, like, we really want to get more of those, and we had a lot more data points to work with. So those are some of the really concrete things I think that need to happen more often.
Something you said actually sparked something I forgot to say. How many of you all use the term culture fit? Let's be real in the room now. This is safe space. All right, so
culture fit. This was my next question.
Culture fit is something that, used to be good, right? That term used to be something taught to us in interviewing. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to make sure somebody fits within your company, all that kind of great stuff. We're actually banning the term at Twilio. And banning the term does not mean you get fired for using it. But what it means is it's a discussion, right? What does culture fit really mean? What are you trying? Use your words. What are you trying to say, right? What are you saying that you feel? And again, what you were talking about, Marco, was around using data and using a rubric and being able to say, okay, these are the things that this person either matches or doesn't. And so culture fit isn't one of those things. It's a catch-all. It's a catch-all. And really, if we're being real, it comes from a place of privilege. It comes from a place of, you don't look like me, act like me, think like me, and therefore you don't fit. But we don't want people to fit into our company. We want people that are going to come in and think differently. We can't be innovative and be a disruptor with people that think exactly like we do today. And so we're banning it. If we hear it, we're changing the discussion. Part of our interview process is we have a pre-cap, which is we sit down, we talk about the criteria for the role. We talk about the candidates that are in the funnel. After the interviews, we have a recap. And in that recap, we have a discussion of feedback. People are supposed to enter in their feedback in an applicant tracking system, but the discussion is actually the more fruitful part of it, where you're talking through the candidates and how you felt and what you found out and the questions that you asked. And when you hear things like culture fit, it's a great discussion. Because one, people go, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say it. And it's not a shaming thing, right? But I've been in this industry for well over a decade, and culture fit happens a lot. Even if it's not called culture fit, they may call it something else. It's just a catch-all. And so pushing people to really explain why they don't want someone there is a good way to open up the discussion and expose biases. We want people to work at our company. It's not the opposite. So why design a system where you are pushing people out? The system should be designed opposite, where you are bringing people in.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pause for a second, if that's okay, because I think we just have a few minutes left. Any questions in the audience? Yes?
Burning question. I'm from Hack the Hood. We work with a lot of 18 to 25-year-olds where we're prepping them to go into apprenticeship programs and coding boot camps. And we've had an issue that we're talking about with a big company, but I just want to throw it out to you because it was extremely upsetting to us. Had a best and the brightest candidate. It went all the way to the last interview. Everyone thought he was going to get in, and the person who was from HR was very upset that this young man said, I'm excited about the money. Very upset that he said he had been arrested even though it was for disturbing the peace, not even like a crime. And very upset that he admitted that people in his family had actually sold marijuana because it proved he was part of a criminal element. So I just would love to hear and kind of, LaFawn, like this is so much what you talk about. How are you educating other people who may not have the insights and the breadth that you have so they don't become obstacles in this process. Because this one person knocked this person out of this opportunity literally forever. This company will never take it, even though they're talking to us now about they know they did wrong and how they can change.
So, honestly, it starts in intentional education. It really is intentional education. So when I talked about the fact that we're doing interview training and hiring manager training and all of that, we also train recruiters, right? So just because you're in HR or part of the people team does not mean you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And so we're intentional about that thought process. And it also comes from the top. Like I told you, my CEO was like, don't be an asshole. That encompasses all of that. If people have a different background or aren't exactly like you, it gets kind of hard when someone says something that they actually can't be, when they talk about criminal background or they talk about, I have children and you start thinking about them differently, or they talk about, all of those categories that are actually protected that you shouldn't make a decision based on, it becomes tough if you don't train people correctly. Say, even if somebody mentions something that are in these categories, you can't go further. You can't probe. You shouldn't ask, and it actually cannot be a part of the hiring process.
And she led him. He did not volunteer any of this.
So that's a problem.
He didn't know she would cross that line.
That's a problem. And unfortunately, not all recruiters and not all people in HR are creative people, and they're not all trained correctly. I don't know that person, so I'm just going to assume with the best of intentions that they did not know that they weren't supposed to lead down that pathway. But it really, you have to have top-down alignment, that this is the kind of culture and company that you want. And then you have to train people to effectively interview folks and hire them without those biases.
Yeah, Lonnie, being on talent acquisition and on HR, how would you want your recruiters to respond to that?
Yeah, and it's really important, and this is something that I'm prideful about LinkedIn. It's really important that HR, recruiting, and hiring teams are very well aligned. So before you even start a program, what are we looking for? What are the things that we're totally not going to? So setting the expectation beforehand, and also being agile. Like we've had instances like that as well, to where there's an agile situation. If there is an instance where there's talent that something might come up, before making that decision, for us at LinkedIn, we're very collaborative. So it's going to be an overall consensus decision, not one person's drive of the decision, even if they are HR or recruiting. So number one, setting the expectation, have meetings, go into the initiative with, this is what we're all going to agree upon collectively and together, right? And if a nuance happens that is out of the norm, we are going to collaboratively discuss it as a team, and we're going to all have an overall consensus agreement of what we're going to do, not just one bias to that. So I think in putting scenarios, the best thing that you can do is that can be a learning experience. So meet with everybody, hey, this happened, blindly state the individual stature and say, this was talent that we missed. How can we better it next time so that HR, that individual, recruiting, the hiring manager, all is in agreement that we're going to be open to this or we're not. And so there is no confusion from that perspective.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to, lowering the bar is a term that's used so much, but it's actually about defining the bar. So it sounds like a bar wasn't properly defined if they weren't able to take that candidate's values, put them back when they're having this conversation, and they chose to prioritize something that maybe doesn't define their bar, actually.
That's right.
I saw a question over here.
Yeah. So last question. Oh, sorry. Hi. I just wanted to ask really quickly. I know that when you talk about your apprenticeship programs, you're targeting non-traditional candidates, but there's non-traditional and then there's non-traditional that are also underrepresented. So I was just wondering, what's the demographic data for the two cohorts that you run?
So ours is our first one, and the criteria was non-traditional and underrepresented, right? And so we were looking for folks that, normally in the tech industry it's, Black and Latinx, but we went further than that. It's also LGBT. It's also, one of our apprentices is first generation from Vietnam. And so it goes beyond some of the just like these two categories, and it's more around what's your story and do you look like normal tech, right? Like that's the best way I can describe it. So we didn't just say you have to be Black or you have to be Latinx, but we say you need to be underrepresented in the tech industry.
Yeah, for LinkedIn's Reach program, it actually wasn't a program that was geared towards diversity. It organically manifested into that. So we just looked for this talent, raw talent that was beyond the general criteria that we had set forth. And in that, the beauty of it was there were Latinos, there were Africans, there were, veterans, there were women, lesbian, gay community. Everyone just kind of came together through it. So it organically happened through the Reach program. The programs that are more geared towards our diversity initiatives they're more purposeful, where we connect with partnerships like JobWell, Hack Reactor, DevColor. We bring the community to our organization. Open Mic was targeting, Black and Latino engineers. So we do have more targeted events like that, but the Reach program in itself, just organically manifested towards identifying diverse talent, which is also a great thing, but it also identified other talent that doesn't fit that diverse criteria, but maybe didn't have a computer science degree, when it was a biology major, a musician, and all those other things. So it was really broadening the net to even beyond that, and that was the beauty of the program.
I think anecdotally, I see a lot less people with kind of a traditional 4-year college background from underrepresented groups coming into this area. I think there's a really acute problem with how we source out of only a handful of universities, and all the rest of them that are turning out different candidates, they're going somewhere else. They're not coming here. They're not actually getting recruited. I haven't really cracked that nut, but I feel like I agree that the kind of people from underrepresented groups are also coming from non-traditional backgrounds today.
So unfortunately, I have to cut this off, but if you weren't able to tell, there's so much perspective, wisdom, knowledge here. So I would encourage you to connect with Marco, LaFawn, Lonnie. You already know, don't ask LaFawn for a business card. and continue the relationship.
That's good. I'm LaFawn everywhere. LaFawn on Twitter, LaFawn at Twilio, I'm LaFawn everywhere. So you can find me.
Thanks, everybody.
So you can give a hand of applause.